You know, I speak with people every day getting ready to move to Toronto, whether they're moving across the world or across the country or maybe across town. A lot of people want to start by renting the property in Toronto just to get a sense of the city, a sense of the neighborhood, before they make a long-term decision to buy and really put roots down in the specific pocket of town. So in this video, I really want to demystify what the rental process looks like in Toronto because it can be stressful, but if you're prepared, it takes all the stress out of it. There are three main buckets we're going to cover in this video. First bucket is people that are moving here and they have a job, they have a salary employment when they're continuing their employment from wherever they're living currently to Toronto. The second bucket is going to be self-employed individuals. These are people that are contractors, that are working for themselves, that they don't have a typical pay stubs you would get as a salary employee. And the third bucket are people that are moving here that are retired and they have maybe an investment portfolio, a real estate portfolio, and they're planning to live off the proceeds from this portfolio. Now let's give a little bit of context on how landlord and tenant relations work here in Toronto. Once a tenant is accepted by a landlord, they become very difficult to evict, even for non-payment of rents. I have one client who's been working with the landlord and tenant board to evict their tenant for the last 8 months. And for the majority of that time, the tenant has not paid rents, and they still have not been able to get a full eviction order for this tenant. So what this means in the city is, in the beginning, when the landlord is deciding to approve a tenant, they have the most power. After they approve the tenant, all the power is lost by the landlord. So in that beginning process, during the interview, the landlord is going to be very thorough and very detail oriented, and they may request a lot of documents from you. So once you finish this video, you're going to get a sense of what those documents look like, and you definitely want to have them in order and be as accommodating as possible to any requests from your potential landlord. All right, let's talk about our first bucket of people moving over to Toronto, and that's the salaried workers that are moving here. Maybe you're relocating for a new job opportunity that you're just starting here in Toronto, or maybe your company has offices all over the world and they're transferring you from one of the stations abroad to the Toronto office. So you are in luck because you're going to have the easiest time renting a property here in Toronto. Landlords like to see stability in employment, especially if you've been working with your firm for quite a long time. That's just going to make it a lot more comfortable for the landlord to approve you. Now, what they're going to want to see from you is a job letter stating your length of employment, the amount of money you make on a yearly basis, along with at least 3 pay stubs from your firm. Most recent pay stubs would be preferred. In addition to that, they would generally want to see a credit report. Now, a credit report can be provided by Equifax or TransUnion, and these credit reports are usually only available to people from the United States or Canada. So if you're moving from somewhere other than the United States or Canada, you probably won't have a credit report, and the landlord may ask for some additional documents just to confirm your credit worthiness, perhaps bank statements or some other letters that will kind of explain to them that you have no outstanding debts and everything is in good standing order. Okay, the next bucket of people we're going to cover are people that are contractors, people that are self-employed, or people that have their own business. And if you're planning on moving to Toronto and you're in that field, there's a few things you need to keep in mind. One, you probably don't have pay stubs and you probably don't have an employment letter, so the landlord is going to ask for a bit more information from you. If you're moving within Canada and within the United States, the landlord will most likely ask for your NOAs or your notice of assessments if you're from Canada, and a similar tax document from the States. Specifically, they want to understand what you make on an annual basis for the last 2 or 3 years, just to get a sense of what your monthly cash flow situation is. If you're not able to provide tax documents of this nature, they generally will move on to asking for bank statements. Anywhere from 3 to 6 months of bank statements would be a reasonable request. Again, just to understand your monthly cash flow position. Now, if you don't have bank statements or you don't want to provide your bank statements, the last ditch effort is cash, because cash is king. If you're able to prepay months of rent, that will speak volumes to your landlord. I recently helped a client from overseas who is a student move to Toronto and rent a studio, and they didn't have any documents to showcase in terms of employment letters, notice of assessments. They ended up prepaying 9 months out of 12 months out of the year, and the landlord gladly accepted them. Okay, we've covered people with a salary job, people that are contractors or self-employed. Next up, we're going to talk about people that don't have an active job. Perhaps you're retired, perhaps you're living off of an investment portfolio or a real estate portfolio, and you're planning on moving over to Toronto. So let's give you guys a sense of what to expect and what the landlords are going to ask of you to kind of document your portfolio, document your monthly cash flow position. right? If perhaps you don't want to showcase your entire portfolio, at the bare minimum, you're going to have to show the landlord what your monthly cash flow looks like, and that will come in the form of either bank statements or investment statements on official letterhead from your investment firm. In terms of your real estate portfolio, it would be very beneficial to have a document that outlines all the income and all the expenses for each property, so the landlord has a quick snapshot of how much monthly income you generate from your real estate portfolio. Beyond that, they're also going to want to see a credit report if you can provide it. They're going to want to see documents of identification in terms of a passport or a driver's license. If all else fails, like I said earlier, cash is king. If you can provide a prepayment of rent, it'll go a long way to assure the landlord of your financial stability and your ability to pay rent on an ongoing basis. Okay, we've taken a look at 3 different individuals that could potentially be moving here to Toronto, and you had a sense of what the expectations on them will be from landlords. Next up, I want to give you guys some tips of things I picked up over the years, just some housekeeping tips to get you ready for renting here in Toronto. Number 1, when you're making a budget for your rental property here in Toronto, a wise thing to do is take a look at your net monthly income divided by half, and that should be your budget for a rental property. So if you make, for example, $10,000 a month, divide that by half, $5,000 should be your maximum rental budget. And from the perspective of the landlord, that's also what they would want to see. If somebody is trying to spend 70% of their monthly income on a rental property, it's not a good look, and it will not leave enough room for them to live their life beyond that. Next tip is LinkedIn. I don't know if you guys have updated your profile recently, but when a landlord interviews a tenant, one of the first things they do is Google search their name. And the results that come up, really important to kind of judge whether a tenant is a good fit for a certain property. LinkedIn is another place that I like to personally search when I'm interviewing tenants. First, you want to make sure that this profile is up to date as possible. So if you have an old job listed in LinkedIn as your current employer, you definitely want to update that and make sure it matches your job letter. So the whole case that you're presenting to your landlord is all lined up and everything makes sense from A to Z. If you're planning on renting a property and you are overseas, the landlord will probably want to meet you. This could take the shape of a Zoom meeting or a Google Meets, or if you're visiting from out of town, they may want to meet you in person. They really want to get a sense of who you are and to make sure you fit the case and profile that you provided them. So don't be surprised if that's a request that comes down the pipe, because it's a very common thing we get to hear. And we've covered a couple of tips, a few more things I want to share about a typical rental situation here in Toronto. Now, the base rent will cover the space that you're renting, but utilities are oftentimes an additional charge. Depends on what type of property you're renting. It could be more utilities or less. For example, in a house, usually you would cover all the utilities, the water, the gas, the electricity, and the internet. In a condo, you could just cover the electricity. Or in newer condos, they actually have more utilities that are on the tenant to cover. In addition to utilities, you will always need to get tenant insurance, which covers liabilities and your personal belongings. That would be all the additional items that you generally have to pay for. Sometimes parking spots and lockers could be extra. Sometimes they're included, but that's on a more case-by-case basis. But utilities, 90% of the time, would be an additional charge into whatever is listed online as the base rent. Okay, now that you have a pretty good sense of what a typical landlord here in Toronto will ask of you prior to you moving over here, the next question is probably, where do you want to live? Because Toronto is a huge city with lots of different neighborhoods, each with their own eclectic flavors, and making that decision can be kind of difficult. I've tried to make it as easy as possible by touring the city, creating lots of videos in all the different neighborhoods, so be sure to check out my channel for the latest videos so you can get a sense of these neighborhoods prior to your move down here to Toronto. Now, if you're moving to Toronto with a family, I've made certain videos just for families that look at the best schools in Toronto, the best public schools, the best private schools, and the neighborhoods that surround them, so you can really get a sense of what these neighborhoods look like and refine your search to just these neighborhoods. And if you're thinking of moving to the city of Toronto in the next little while, you probably want a professional real estate broker in your corner. And that's where I come in. My name is Philip Cotlier. I help families move to Toronto from across the world, across the country, or just across town. If you're thinking of moving in 8 days or 80 days, I'd love to hear from you. Just give me a call. I'm happy to help you make your move everything you want it to be. Best of all, my services are free of charge for new tenants and new people looking to buy a property in Toronto. I hope you guys picked up some valuable nuggets while you were watching today's video. And if any questions came up, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below or drop me a line directly. All my contact details are in the description, including my email and my phone number. I'd love to hear from you guys. Now, moving forward, we're putting out a video a week regarding everything to do with living in Toronto and moving to Toronto, including neighborhood guides, property tours, and general real estate information. So don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be the first to be notified once a new video is released. That's it for today. We'll see you guys on the next one.